The room hums with a sound that never stops. It isn't music, not quite. More like the breathing of a machine that dreams. You're standing in front of it now, close enough to hear the tiny tremor in its heart. Rotors turning, metal clicking, electricity whispering through wires. The air tastes of dust and oil. Somewhere nearby, a radiator hisses softly, like rain falling behind walls. You can feel the temperature shift between breaths, warm where the lamps glow, cold near the floor where the past still lingers. Before you drift further into this hum, take a moment to breathe. If stories told in whispers are where you find peace, stay here a while. Let the noise of the present fade behind you. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, another city, another time zone, another sleepless night, tell us where you are, or which image lingers with you the most. Now, let the codes breathe. Let the rain fall. Let the hum of the machine become the heartbeat of the story. You're listening to echoes of war. It's late. Or maybe early. Time doesn't keep its shape here. Light leaks in through narrow windows, carving the room into slivers of gold and shadow. Dust drifts like snow in the beam of a single bulb. You reach out, and your fingertips brush the edge of the machine's casing. Cool, solid, alive. The Enigma sits before you like an altar. Wood, brass, electricity, and silence. It was built to keep secrets, but tonight it feels like it wants to speak. You press one key. The lamp board answers with a faint pulse of light, a letter that isn't the one you typed. Another key. Another light. Each click is a question whispered into the dark. Who are you? What are you hiding? The war has many fronts, but this one has no trenches, no uniforms, no glory. Only the relentless rhythm of typewriter keys, the hiss of paper sliding into files, the hum of machines that never tire. Somewhere far away, men are dying for messages written here, sentences that arrive too late or just in time. The people in this room will never see the ocean battles they change, or the cities they save from fire. They will never be thanked, never named. Their victories will vanish into silence, the kind that outlasts even memory. You close your eyes. Behind the lids, the sound becomes rhythm, part heartbeat, part metronome, part prayer. It's the sound of logic trying to save a world that's already burning. Outside, rain slicks the English countryside. A bicycle bell rings in the distance. Someone walks past the window, coat collar turned up, carrying a folder marked "Most Secret." The path they walk will someday be called Bletchley Park, but tonight it's just another quiet place full of tired people and impossible hopes. Inside, the Enigma waits. Its rotors shimmer faintly under the light, circles within circles, an alphabet of infinite combinations. Every letter it scrambles is a heartbeat lost to the storm. Every mistake it hides costs someone a name, a face, a tomorrow. And yet, the same machine that hides truth will also reveal it, because somewhere, far away, in another dimly lit room, someone else is listening. Their fingers move through equations instead of triggers, their battlefield a desk covered in chalk dust and coffee stains. They don't carry rifles. They carry patterns. And in those patterns, they will find a way to see through the fog. You can almost feel the moment approaching, the point where human thought begins to outpace destruction, where silence becomes signal, where the mind itself becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. The sound in the room grows louder now, not noise, but purpose. It fills the walls, the lungs, the space between heartbeat and breath. It's the sound of resistance born in numbers and logic, not in gunfire. The sound of people deciding that understanding can be an act of defiance. Chapter 1. Before Enigma, the Codebreaker's War begins. Part 1. The Language of Machines. It begins, as all wars do, with a sound. Not gunfire, not marching boots. Just the quiet click of a key being pressed for the first time. You're standing in a dim Berlin workshop, sometime around 1920. The world has barely begun to rebuild itself from the ruins of the Great War. The air smells of varnish and solder. Copper wire coils glint under the flicker of a lamp. At a wooden desk sits Arthur Skerbius, engineer, dreamer, and believer in the promise of order. He moves slowly, deliberately, tightening a screw, adjusting a switch. He doesn't see the future in the way prophets do. He builds it, one circuit at a time. On the table before him rests a strange contraption, a box of brass and bakelite, fitted with a keyboard and a series of rotating discs. When a key is pressed, the current passes through the rotors, and a different letter glows on a small panel. Every press creates a new cipher, an alphabet constantly reborn. Skerbius smiles faintly. He calls it Enigma. Outside, Berlin is alive again. Jazz clubs, trams, and the faint smell of coal smoke drifting from chimneys. Germany is wounded but restless, inventing its way toward the next disaster. And in this small workshop, something dangerous has been born, a machine that can make language itself untrustworthy. At first, Skerbius tries to sell it to banks and corporations, promising security in a world obsessed with secrets. But he finds no buyers. Only the military understands what he's built. They see not a curiosity, but a weapon, one that can speak in silence. Within a few years, the German armed forces adopt Enigma for their communications. Skerbius doesn't live to see what his invention will do. He dies in a horse accident in 1929, his name already half forgotten. But his machine will outlive him, and for a time, so will his illusion of perfection. You can almost feel history pause, as if holding its breath. The gears begin to turn. The letters start to dance. And in the space between signal and silence, a new kind of war begins. Part 2. Poland's Quiet Revolution. Now the air smells different. Chalk, ink, winter. You're in a lecture hall at Poznan University, 1932. 3 young mathematicians sit in the front row, barely 20 years old. Their names are Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rosicki, and Henryk Zygalski. They are not soldiers, not spies, not even linguists. They are puzzle solvers, graduates of a course in applied mathematics designed to test one simple question. Can logic defeat secrecy? Outside, snow falls in slow spirals. Inside, a chalkboard is covered with tangled alphabets and substitution grids. Rejewski stares at them as if they were constellations. He has the quiet patience of a man who believes that even chaos has rules. You just have to listen long enough to find them. By the end of the year, the Polish Cipher Bureau assigns them to a secret office in Warsaw. Their task: decipher the unbreakable German Enigma. The office is small, the air thick with tobacco smoke and uncertainty. Each morning they arrive in silence, hang their coats, and begin again, rewriting alphabets, redrawing circuits, mapping the invisible. Rejewski builds mathematical models of the machine without ever having seen one. He studies intercepted messages, looking for patterns hidden in repetition. He notices that German operators, being human, make mistakes. They repeat greetings, names, phrases, and within those imperfections he finds rhythm, the ghost of structure. It's not a eureka moment. It's hundreds of small realizations stacked like dominoes. In 1933, he does it. He reconstructs the Enigma's wiring using pure mathematics. No machine, no blueprint, No key, just the symmetry of thought. When the news reaches his superiors, they don't celebrate. They simply nod. There is no victory yet. Only a door quietly opening in a long corridor of secrets. You can hear it now, the first sound of resistance. Not the roar of engines, but the scratch of pencil on paper. The war hasn't started, but the counterattack already has. Part 3. The Gift in the Rain. 6 years later, the world trembles again. It's July 1939, and you're standing in a clearing outside Warsaw, near the village of Pyry. The summer air is heavy with thunder. The forest hums with insects and fear. A small wooden building sits in the clearing, guarded by Polish soldiers who pretend not to exist. Inside, 3 nations have gathered: Poland, France, and Britain. Each sends its quietest minds, not its generals. On the table rests a wooden crate. Inside, a complete replica of the German Enigma, built by Rejewski's team. Beside it, diagrams, code sheets, notes. Years of work condensed into fragile paper. The Polish officers explain everything: the wiring, the settings, the mathematics that made it possible. They know war is coming. They also know they will be crushed first, so they give the secret away. Outside, thunder cracks like a gunshot. The delegates shake hands in silence. There are no speeches, no signatures, only the understanding that what has been shared may someday save the world. The British courier wraps the crate in canvas, loads it into a car, and drives toward the border. Rain begins to fall, a steady, rhythmic downpour, like the tapping of keys. By the time the convoy reaches Paris, the code has already changed again. But the gift endures. Months later, Poland will be invaded from both east and west. Rejewski and his colleagues will flee through Romania, leaving behind everything but the knowledge in their heads. That knowledge will outlive nations. It will cross borders unseen, like a signal that refuses to fade. You can still hear it, the rain on the roof of that safe house in Pyry, the sound of a small country giving the world its first defense against darkness. Part 4. The Threshold. Now you're standing on British soil, autumn 1939. The war has begun. The air smells of damp leaves and diesel, the horizon bruised with smoke. In the distance, a mansion rises beyond the mist, ivy-covered, quiet, improbable. Bletchley Park. No one knows it yet, but this will become the beating heart of Britain's invisible war. You follow a path lined with puddles and bicycles. A guard at the gate nods you through. Inside, the place hums with a strange mixture of panic and precision. Linguists, chess champions, mathematicians, even poets. The rooms are small, the tea weak, the heating unreliable. But the energy is relentless. Somewhere in these halls, a wooden crate from Poland is being unpacked. Its contents are handled like relics. Fingers trace the edges of the Enigma replica, its brass letters worn smooth from use. The rain outside taps against the window like a code waiting to be read. You stand in the doorway, listening to the sound of it all. The machines, the pencils, the breath between thought and discovery. The war of steel and smoke has only just begun, but the war of silence is already halfway won. The first hum of understanding fills the room, the sound that will carry through the rest of the war, the low, steady heartbeat of minds refusing to give up. Chapter 2. Bletchley Park, the secret brain of Britain. Part 1. The mansion that shouldn't matter. It doesn't look like a weapon. A rambling Victorian house in Buckinghamshire, its brickwork streaked with moss, its pond full of reeds and secrets. You stand at the gate on a grey morning in 1939. Rain beads on bicycle handlebars lined up like a regiment of patients. The air smells of damp wool, coal smoke, and ink. Inside, the corridors breathe a different weather. Warm, close, humming. Typewriters chatter through the walls. Somewhere, a kettle whistles, the one reliable sound of comfort in a place built entirely on tension. It shouldn't work, this odd collection of minds. Linguists, chess champions, Egyptologists, debutantes who once translated poetry for fun. But war has a strange talent for rearranging purpose. Here, every eccentricity becomes a strength. They call the new arrivals the cleverest crowd that ever forgot to comb its hair. No ranks, no medals, only the unspoken vow that what happens inside these rooms will remain invisible until the end of time. You listen to the floorboards creak as people pass, notebooks pressed tight to their chests. Outside, the rain thickens, blurring the windows until the mansion looks like it's sinking into fog. This is where thought will fight back. Part 2. The Mind of Alan Turing. Down one corridor, bare bulbs, the scent of machine oil, you find him. A young man in an ill-fitting suit, cycling clips still on his trousers. Alan Turing looks more like a distracted schoolteacher than the mind that will tilt the war. He sits hunched over diagrams scrawled on scrap paper, pencil tapping out rhythms only he can hear. Letters, rotors, probabilities, all turning in his head faster than the machines can spin. He's designing something that doesn't yet exist, a thinking engine to outthink the German Enigma. People find him odd. He finds most people slower than mathematics. But when he speaks about logic, his words gather light. When he pauses, it feels like the air itself is calculating. On his desk sits a mug stained with tea, beside a half-eaten apple that's already browning. The small details of a man building eternity in miniature. Outside, bicycles clatter over gravel as more recruits arrive. Inside, Turing redraws the possible. Every few hours he stands, walks the corridor once, then returns to the paper as if the walls themselves have whispered a new equation. He isn't chasing glory. He's chasing clarity. And somewhere in that chase, the first sketch of the bomb begins to breathe. Part 3. The Women of the Park. Listen closely and you'll hear another rhythm, the lighter tap of typewriters, the soft rustle of uniform skirts. They are the unseen backbone of Bletchley, the wrens, the clerks, the translators, the radio listeners. Most are barely 20, carrying more responsibility than the world will ever credit them for. You can picture them at dawn, cycling through fog, singing quietly to keep warm. They file into the huts, hang damp coats by the stove, and sit before the machines. Their fingers move faster than thought, recording, sorting, punching holes in paper tape. One of them, Mavis Beatty, keeps a notebook of Italian words she likes the sound of. She'll use them later when she helps crack a naval cipher that saves an entire Mediterranean fleet. Another, Margaret Rock, jokes that she dreams in letters now, rows and rows of them, marching behind her eyelids. They work long shifts, their laughter thin but stubborn. Sometimes, when the pressure breaks, someone tells a joke about romance in Hut 6, and the whole room erupts in giggles before falling silent again. They know the enemy listens, even to joy. At night, they walk back to dormitories lit only by blackout lamps. The path glows faintly under frost. Their breath clouds the air like Morse code for hope. Part 4. The Visitors and the Geese. One afternoon a black car arrives, unannounced. Out steps Winston Churchill, rain dripping from his hat. He strides through the corridors with the impatience of a man who's lived too long among generals and finally found real brains. He studies the rows of young people hunched over ciphers, the clattering machines, the walls of intercepted messages pinned like constellations. When someone apologizes for the cramped conditions, he grins. These are the geese that lay the golden eggs, and never cackle. 4 weeks afterward, morale soars. The workers still pedal through rain, still live on weak tea and ration biscuits, but the Prime Minister's words hum like electricity in the huts. They aren't invisible anymore. Not entirely. Someone at the top knows what they're doing, and will protect it. Part 5. The First Cracks in the Code. Evening descends early in November 1939. A storm crawls across the sky. Wind presses the blackout curtains flat against the glass. Inside Hut 8, a small team gathers around Turing's desk. The bomb prototype, wheels, wires, relays, spins and coughs, the sound halfway between a clock and a heartbeat. Hours pass. Paper piles up. Fatigue becomes background noise. Then a shout, quiet but certain. I think we have it. A message unravels on the page. One sentence suddenly legible after weeks of static. It isn't dramatic, just a German weather report. But it means the system works. For a moment, no one speaks. They just listen to the rain outside and the steady thrum of the machine, as if history itself is exhaling. Part 6. A Day in the Huts. Morning again. A kettle whistles, bicycles squeal, boots stamp the cold from their soles. Steam fogs the windows. The smell of porridge seeps through the corridors. Someone's lost a slide rule. Someone else hums a waltz. It could be any office in England, until you notice the piles of messages marked top secret, most immediate. You take a seat by a window and watch the rhythm unfold. Coffee, calculation, code, silence. A bell rings for tea break. Laughter spills out, short and bright, then dies as another signal arrives. They live suspended between monotony and revelation. Each minute could change the war, or nothing at all. When night falls, the mansion glows faintly, an island of thought in a darkened country. The fields around it are silent except for the hum of generators and the click of bicycle wheels heading home. Above, the sky clears. Stars appear like pins in a vast encrypted map. You breathe out, the air misting against glass. Tomorrow the same rhythm will return. Tea, code, silence, hope. And that, more than anything, is how the war will be won. Part 7. The Weight of Knowing. It's late again. The huts creak. The typewriters rest. In the cafeteria, a single bulb burns over empty mugs. A few workers linger, talking in half-sentences about weather and ration cards, never about work. The rules forbid it, but habit enforces it. They've started to measure time not in hours, but in decrypts. One clear message means another convoy saved, another 1,000 lives still breathing. But each success carries the quiet ache of what can't be shared. A young woman closes her notebook and whispers, "It feels like being alive in someone else's dream." No one answers. They just sit, listening to the wind slide across the roof. Outside, frost forms on the bicycles. Inside, the machines sleep. Tomorrow they will wake, hungry for patterns. Part 8. The Living Brain. From above, if you could see it, Bletchley Park at night would look like a giant circuit board, huts glowing like nodes, paths connecting them like wires. Messages flow in, conclusions flow out, energy loops back to begin again. It is a living mind made of flesh and light and silence. Each person a neuron, each letter a pulse. each act of understanding a small defiance against oblivion. And if you listen closely, beneath the wind and the whisper of trees, you can still hear it, the hum that began with Scourbius's machine, traveling now through human hands and human fatigue, growing louder, clearer, unstoppable. The mansion doesn't know it yet, but it has already changed the course of the world. Chapter 3: The Machine Against the Sea, Cracking U-Boat Codes. Part 1: The Ocean's Cipher. The sea speaks in fragments, a low frequency, endless, undecoded. You're standing on a windswept dock in early 1941. Cranes groan, cables whip, gulls wheel in circles above the grey. Salt cuts the air. Diesel fumes hang like a memory of thunder. Somewhere beyond the horizon, hundreds of submarines prowl. They move silently through corridors of cold water, hunting convoys that crawl from America toward the British Isles. Each U-boat carries an Enigma machine bolted beside the radio set, its rotors gleaming like wet teeth. Every night the captains send messages, brief, encrypted, perfect. The sea swallows them whole. And far away, in a landlocked mansion filled with tired minds, someone tries to listen. The Atlantic is the code made manifest, patternless, violent, and full of meaning you can't yet read. Every wave hides a message, every silence a secret. Part 2: The Listeners. Now you're on a cliff in northern Scotland. A small wooden hut clings to the edge, its walls lined with coils of wire. Inside sits a girl no older than 20, headphones pressed tight, pencil poised. She belongs to the Y service, the network of silent ears scattered across the empire. Through the static she hears faint Morse, dots, dashes, pauses like held breath. She writes what she can before the signal fades. No context, just rhythm. Outside, the wind screams. Inside, her world is the hum of the receiver. Each intercepted pulse is a thread she will never see woven into its final pattern. At midnight she folds the sheets, labels them, sends them south by teleprinter. No signature, no thanks. The next shift takes her place. Somewhere in Buckinghamshire, another operator will read her lines and begin the next layer of translation. Together they are a single, unseen organism, the human antenna of a desperate island. Part 3: Convoy HX 229. It's spring 1941. Convoy HX 229 stretches across the Atlantic like a fragile necklace of light. 40 merchant ships, guarded by a few weary destroyers. The men on deck scan the water for shadows that move the wrong way. They sleep in boots. They dream of home. You can smell wet rope, burnt coffee, engine oil. You can taste metal in every breath. Above, the sky is starless. Below, the black water gleams like polished coal. In Hut 8, the intercepts arrive, encrypted reports from U-boats coordinating attacks. The Enigma settings have changed again. New rotors. New plug board. Turing's team works through the night, trying to catch the pattern before the convoy vanishes. Back at sea, the first torpedo hits before dawn. The horizon blooms briefly, then folds into darkness. Ships scatter, radioing half-coded pleas that dissolve in static. By the time the new settings fall into place at Bletchley, the water is already full of oil and fire. Victory and failure arrive in the same message, only hours apart. Part 4: The Sea's Reply. For every convoy lost, a new codebook is found. It happens by chance more often than by plan. One morning in May 1941, HMS Bulldog hauls a crippled U-boat to the surface. Smoke, shouting, gunfire, surrender. In the scramble, a boarding party leaps below deck. The air is thick. Diesel, fear, the stench of burnt insulation. They search by feel and flashlight until they find it. The Enigma, still warm, still alive. Beside it lie the day's key sheets, damp but legible. They carry the prize to the open air, wrapping it in canvas as though shielding it from shame. The ocean heaves beneath them, ignorant and immense. When the crate reaches Bletchley, the park holds its breath. Fingers trace the salt-stained pages. For the first time, the German Navy's private language is naked before them. Within weeks, Allied convoys begin arriving intact. The balance shifts by millimeters, but at sea, millimeters mean survival. Part 5. The Blackout. Success never lasts. Early 1942. The Germans adapt. A new version of Enigma, Triton, the Shark cipher, enters service with the Atlantic Fleet. 4 rotors now instead of 3. Billions of new combinations. The sea turns dark again. You're back in Hut 8. The machines grind and whir, but no patterns emerge. Weeks pass. Months. Convoy reports vanish into silence. The operators stop marking maps. There's nothing left to mark. A kind of exhaustion takes hold, too quiet to be despair, too constant to be hope. Turing paces the corridor at night, counting steps, rehearsing probability formulas under his breath. The sound of the bomb machines once filled the air. Now their rhythm feels hollow, like heartbeats lost in echo. Outside, the blackout deepens. Even the stars seem encrypted. Part 6. The Boy in the Radio Room. Cut now to the other side of the silence. Inside U-Boat U-247, a 21-year-old radio operator adjusts his dials. Sweat runs down his neck. The air is thick with oil and unspoken fear. He sends his coordinates, signs off, waits for reply. None comes. He retunes, convinced it's interference. He sends again. Still nothing. He looks at the captain, who shrugs. No reason to worry. But the boy feels the weight of absence pressing in. In his headphones, the static sounds like breathing. He imagines the Allies have gone deaf. He doesn't know that above him, across 1,000 miles of dark water, someone is already working to hear again. When their boat is finally found months later, it goes down without resistance. The operator's log is recovered, the last line smudged by salt. Silence continues. Part 7. The Long Return of Meaning. December 1942. In a cold hut thick with cigarette smoke, a message decrypts cleanly for the first time in nearly a year. It gives the position of 3 U-boats. The Admiralty reroutes a convoy before dawn. Every ship arrives. No one cheers. They're too tired for celebration. But when the operators step outside, the air smells sharper, cleaner. For the first time in months, the frost glittering on the grass looks like hope rather than ash. The blackout begins to lift, letter by letter. Each new success shortens the war by an invisible inch. Part 8. The Weight of Water. Still, the cost lingers. Those who read the messages see what others never will. Lists of names, ships lost before warning could reach them. They carry that silence like ballast. In the evenings, some walk to the lake behind the mansion. They stand at its edge, watching wind ripple the surface, pretending it's the sea. One woman drops pebbles into the water, each one a name she'll never speak. The ripples spread, collide, disappear. Inside, the bombs start again, wheels spinning, lights blinking. Outside, the world waits for meaning. You listen to the two sounds merging, the mechanical heartbeat of Bletchley and the distant pulse of the ocean. Together they form the same rhythm: endurance. Part 9. The Machine and the Sea. By 1943, the tide has turned. Convoys move under cover of intelligence invisible to the enemy. Ships that once died nameless now glide through fog unharmed. The ocean, once owned by the U-boats, becomes a mirror again, reflecting not dominance but uncertainty. In a final twist of symmetry, the same science that built Enigma now dismantles it. A machine born of precision defeated by another born of persistence. Metal against metal. Thought against arrogance. You picture it, the storm-swept Atlantic, the moon hidden, the hum of the bomb echoing faintly even here, translated by imagination into the rhythm of waves. For a moment, the two fronts, the sea and the hut, are one continuous mind. Every rotation of a rotor above the water answered by a turning gear below it. And then silence again. Not defeat. Not victory. Just the sea resuming its language of patience. Part 10. Aftermath. Morning breaks pale and colorless over the park. A message arrives. Another convoy safe. Someone yawns, stretches, pours tea into a chipped mug. The extraordinary has become ordinary. They don't know yet that historians will call this the Battle of the Atlantic. They only know that tonight they'll sleep a little deeper, that somewhere out their sailors will see dawn. The war still roars on other fronts, but here, in the hum and rain and paper, one front has quieted. The machine keeps turning. The sea keeps breathing, and between them lies the thinnest thread of human will, fragile, stubborn, unbroken. Chapter 4. The Bomb and the Mind. Building a Thinking Machine. Part 1. The Machine Room. The first thing you notice is the heat. It rises from the floor, from the machines, from the sleepless effort of thought turned mechanical. The air tastes faintly of ozone and oil. Paper curls in the humidity. You're standing in the bomb room, the beating heart of Bletchley Park. Rows of great metal frames fill the space, their panels crowded with rotating wheels and colored wires. When the switch is thrown, a low growl begins, soft at first, then steady, rhythmic, hypnotic. The operators wear headphones to muffle the roar, but the vibration still climbs through their boots, up their spines, into their minds. The machine's rhythm becomes their own. Each wheel represents a possibility. Each rotation, a guess at truth. One by one, the bombs eliminate impossibility until only a handful of answers remain. It is the sound of reason chewing through chaos. A woman in uniform moves between the rows, clipboard in hand, pencil behind her ear. She checks the settings, notes the clicks, resets the wires. She doesn't know exactly what the machine is solving, only that its answers mean lives. Her fingers are inked with graphite and determination. She hums quietly, as if to calm the machines. The room smells of work, hot metal, paper, sweat, the ghost of electricity. This is what intelligence sounds like when it has no time to rest. Part 2. The Architect. A few huts away, Alan Turing sits alone at his desk. The room is barely wide enough for him to stretch his legs, yet he's built universes inside it. On his wall hang sketches of wiring patterns and logical diagrams drawn in a hand that wavers between genius and exhaustion. He is not thinking of war tonight. He's thinking of process, of how thought itself could be broken into sequences, input, decision, outcome. He's building the architecture of the modern mind without knowing what to call it. His colleagues talk of encryption and keys. Turing talks of states and machines, of logic stripped of emotion. He believes that everything, music, language, even love, could be expressed as a sequence of decisions if one only knew the rules. Outside, the night murmurs with the sound of bombs turning. He listens, hearing not machinery but rhythm, the pulse of an idea larger than war. He begins to write in his notebook. Can a machine think? He pauses, then crosses out think and writes decide. On the desk beside him sits an apple, half eaten. The fruit is beginning to brown, yet it seems to glow under the lamplight, a small, perfect metaphor for impermanence. Part 3. The Engineers at Dollis Hill. 10 miles away, at the Post Office Research Station in Dollis Hill, engineers work through the night. Their workspace is a chaos of wires, soldering irons, and half-drunk cups of tea. Tommy Flowers, quiet, practical, stubborn, oversees the build of Turing's design. He has the calm patience of a man used to coaxing order from stubborn circuits. He doesn't talk about philosophy. He just makes things work. While mathematicians dream, Flowers constructs reality. Metal frames, relay boards, spools of cable that look like arteries. The heat from the lamps turns the air thick. Someone opens a window. London's fog slides in, cold and heavy. It smells of coal and rain and exhaustion. When the first bomb prototype runs, it doesn't sound heroic. It clatters, grinds, hesitates, like a beast unsure of its purpose. Then, finally, the rhythm stabilizes, wheels turning, contacts clicking, lights winking in sequence. Flowers doesn't smile. He just nods once, wipes his hands on a rag, and says quietly, "That'll do." He doesn't know it yet, but his work here will lead directly to something even greater. Colossus, the first electronic computer. The idea of speed without fatigue. Of calculation faster than imagination. The line between code breaking and creation blurs forever. Part 4. Gordon Welchman's Lines. Back at Bletchley, mathematician Gordon Welchman leans over a sheet of graph paper. The lamps flicker as he sketches diagonal lines across a grid of letters. To an outsider, it looks like nothing. To him, it is revelation. The diagonal board, his invention, allows the bomb to compare possibilities in parallel. It saves hours, sometimes days, of work. When he explains it, even Turing blinks, as if seeing the machine learn to reason. The test run begins at midnight. The new circuitry hums in a lower tone, smoother, calmer, almost confident. In less than an hour, a message decrypts cleanly. The operators exchange glances but don't cheer. Instead, they look at the machine with something close to awe. For the first time, it feels as though the logic itself has caught fire. Part 5. The People Who Feed the Machine. To outsiders, this war would seem mechanical, bloodless, abstract. But behind every relay, every calculation, are hands and eyes and nerves. The operators endure 12-hour shifts in heat that buckles paper and melts chocolate in pockets. They log every result, check every connection, listen to the same noise for weeks without rest. The sound infiltrates dreams. Some wake at night to phantom clicking, hearing the bomb even when the world is silent. Tea cools on desks. Sandwiches go stale. Still, no one leaves early, because when the machine stops, people die. That truth hums beneath every rotation. There are no medals, no pay raises, no speeches. Only the quiet camaraderie of those who understand the scale of what they're saving, without ever seeing it. At shift's end they walk home through empty streets, faces lit by blackout lamps. The sky above is dark and starless, but the hum follows them in memory. The rhythm of purpose. The music of survival disguised as noise. Part 6. The Cost of Thought. As the months wear on, the operators begin to blur into the machines they serve. They move with the same precision, breathe in unison, sleep in fragments. The language of numbers becomes their native tongue. In the cafeteria, conversation drifts toward abstraction. If every pattern can be broken, is anything truly secret? If a machine can mimic choice, what becomes of faith? They never find answers. But the questions stay, like echoes in the humming air. One night, a wren named Elsie sits by the open window of her quarters, unable to sleep. The wind carries the faint vibration of the bomb hall. She wonders if somewhere, miles away, the enemy hears a similar sound. If somewhere in Berlin, another mind is listening to the same rhythm. Logic against logic, endurance against arrogance. She writes a single line in her diary before dawn. It feels as if the world itself is thinking. Part 7. The Night Walk. Turing walks the grounds alone. Frost crunches beneath his shoes. In the huts, the machines still spin, their muffled roar blending with the sigh of the wind. He pauses by the lake, where ice has begun to form along the edges. The surface glows faintly in the moonlight, flat, mathematical, infinite. He thinks about the patterns inside the water, the geometry of ripples, the equations that describe them. He thinks about consciousness, whether what he's building could one day surpass his own capacity for wonder. He smiles, a tired, private smile. Then he whispers, half to himself, "They'll outthink us one day, and they won't need sleep." The sound vanishes into the fog. He turns back toward the mansion, his silhouette dissolving into darkness. Behind him, the lake stills again, holding the reflection of the sky, a code only nature can solve. Part 8. The Living Thought. Dawn filters through the frosted windows of the bomb hall. The machines slow, their motors cooling, their lights dimming to amber. A new shift takes over, fresh eyes on tired miracles. From above, the rows of bombs look like organ pipes, each tuned to a different note. Together, they hum the sound of intelligence becoming self-aware. No one here will call it that, of course. They'll call it computation, pattern analysis, cryptography. But the truth is simpler. The machines have begun to mirror their makers. They imitate patience. They replicate logic. They endure. And somewhere inside that repetition, something very close to thought begins to glow. Quiet, steady, unblinking. The line between tool and mind fades. The war goes on. But beneath it all, a second creation has begun, the birth of reasoning itself. Chapter 5. Secrets Within Secrets. The German Counterintelligence War. Part 1. The Whisper in Berlin. Berlin, 1943. Snow drifts between searchlights. Tramlines hiss with sleet. You climb the steps of the Abwehr headquarters. Limestone slick, echoing boots, the smell of wet wool and tobacco. Inside, the corridors glow with the cold light of bureaucracy. Maps on the walls. Pins in red. Silence disguised as order. At the far end of the hall sits Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, hands folded, eyes sunk deep behind wire-rimmed glasses. He reads the latest reports. Convoys sunk, others mysteriously missed. The mathematics of war no longer add up. He exhales smoke through a half-open window. The air tastes of iron. Someone, somewhere, is listening. But the enigma is unbreakable. He repeats the phrase like prayer, though faith is thinning. Each intercepted failure feels too precise, too deliberate. Even the walls seem to lean closer. You can sense the tremor beneath the calm, a regime beginning to doubt itself, but forbidden to admit the doubt aloud. Part 2. The Technicians of Silence. Downstairs, in a small laboratory that smells of oil and cold coffee, technicians dismantle Enigma machines piece by piece. Rotors glint under fluorescent light. An engineer in spectacles adjusts a wire, wipes grease from his fingers, and mutters that nothing is wrong with the design. They test, recalibrate, retest. Each time the result is the same: perfection. The flaw, then, must be human. Reports arrive from U-boat flotillas, operators reusing daily keys, mistyping greetings, sending messages twice. Tiny cracks in discipline widening into catastrophe. A young operator confesses he sent his sweetheart's initials at the end of a coded message. The confession earns him a transfer to the Eastern Front. No one speaks of him again. In the static between their machines, the engineers can almost hear the quiet laughter of fate, the might of empire undone by sentiment, logic defeated by loneliness. Part 3. The Shadow of Canaris. Canaris walks home through Tiergarten after dusk. The park is nearly empty, its statues powdered with snow. He pauses beneath a dead tree and listens to the hum of distant trams. Berlin still moves, but slower now, like a body losing blood. He thinks of the men he's helped smuggle from Germany, the letters he's hidden, the careful double meanings threaded through his reports. A patriot to none, loyal only to conscience. Yet even he cannot say aloud what he suspects, that the Allies are reading everything. To question the machine is to question the Führer's infallibility, and doubt has become treason. When he returns to his office, he writes a memo recommending stricter procedure, fresh keys, shorter transmissions. He signs it without hope. By morning it has vanished into the labyrinth of signatures and stamps. Somewhere a clerk files it under resolved. Part 4. The Café of Rumors. A few streets away, near Friedrichstrasse, officers gather in a smoke-thick café. Their uniforms are immaculate, their laughter brittle. They talk of convoys lost, of a new Allied weapon that sees through clouds. Someone swears he heard the British have built a machine that listens to thought itself. They drink schnapps to silence the absurdity. Outside, a siren wails. The lights dim for an air raid. In the dark, conversation falters. No one mentions Enigma. The word has become dangerous, like saying the name of a ghost. When the all-clear sounds, they finish their drinks in silence. One leaves a cigarette burning in the ashtray, its ember glowing like a single red letter that refuses to fade. Part 5. The Mathematician. In a basement office near Potsdam, a mathematician named Friedrich Keller runs endless permutations on paper. He's been ordered to prove that Enigma remains secure. He fills notebooks with numbers until the ink bleeds through. He knows the truth already. Any code made by men can be unmade by men, but he cannot write that sentence. He stands before his superior, a colonel with a blank face. "We are losing convoys," Keller says quietly. "Perhaps there is a statistical." "Enough." The colonel's tone is calm, final. "You will not speak of statistics again." By evening Keller's office is empty. His name disappears from the personnel list. The silence around him becomes official. Part 6. The Collapse of Faith. Spring 1944. The walls tremble as Allied bombers pass overhead, their engines beating like distant drums of judgment. Inside the Abwehr building, officers shuffle papers that no longer matter. The Reich's edges are unraveling, but the language of control persists. Reports, signatures, seals, denials. In one corner office, an engineer opens an Enigma for the last time. He runs his fingers over the keys, feels the smooth wear of thousands of messages. Love, orders, lies. He realizes the machine has outlasted its empire. He types a final test line, the mechanical clack echoing through the empty hall. Glaub nicht alles, was du hörst. Don't believe everything you hear. Then he powers it down. The lamps fade one by one until only the reflection of his face remains in the glass. Part 7. The End of the Abwehr. July 1944. After the failed attempt on Hitler's life, suspicion devours the Abwehr. Files vanish. Officers vanish. Canaris is arrested, taken to Flossenburg, and left to contemplate the irony of loyalty measured in silence. When the guards come for him, he asks for a few minutes to write. They grant him a pencil. He writes one line: "Better to die for conscience than to live for deceit." He folds the paper, places it in his pocket, and walks out without looking back. Weeks later, his body will be hanged with piano wire, his memo lost, his doubts vindicated by history. But that night, in the quiet between executions, one guard claims he heard him humming softly, something that might have been a hymn, or perhaps just the rhythm of a typewriter remembered in dreams. Part 8. The Last Transmission. April 1945. The Reich is ash. In a bunker near Potsdam, a lone radio operator sends one final message before abandoning his post. He doesn't know if anyone is still listening. He types slowly, mechanically, as shells fall in the distance. An alle Stationen. Keep faith. The machine still works. He waits for a reply that never comes. When the power fails, the room fills with the smell of hot dust. He removes the rotors, places them in a tin box, and buries it behind the bunker wall. Years later, archaeologists will find it, rusted but intact. The letters still visible on the metal edges. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. 26 symbols. Enough to tell every story ever hidden, if only you know how to listen. Part 9. The Echo of Doubt. Back at Bletchley, months later, a decrypted message crosses Turing's desk. It's one of the final German transmissions, broken easily now, almost anticlimactic. He reads it once, sets it aside, and feels an unexpected sadness. There's something human in the enemy's last attempt to be heard, the same stubborn refusal to surrender to silence. He wonders if they, too, sensed the paradox. That faith in perfection is what destroys it. That secrecy is strongest only when shared between minds brave enough to question it. Outside, the spring rain begins again. The same rhythm as the one that fell over Pyre years ago when the first secret was given away. The same rhythm that will fall long after the last machine stops. Chapter 6. The Decoder's Burden. Secrets that couldn't be shared. Part 1. The Room of Knowledge. The war outside has changed rhythm again. The Allied tide is rising. Yet inside Bletchley Park, the rooms grow quieter, not louder. You're standing in Hut 6, walls lined with intercepts, maps pinned with red string, the air thick with smoke and concentration. Every sound seems too loud: the rustle of paper, the creak of chairs, the faint hiss of the radiators. The operators are tired beyond measure. They know too much to celebrate. Each day brings new messages: ship sinkings, troop movements, casualty lists hidden in code. They decipher them, record them, file them away. Then another message comes, and another, and another. Each decoded line is a thread in a tapestry of loss. The people here have learned to read death without flinching. Part 2. The Mathematics of Mercy. One afternoon, a small group gathers in the corner of the hut. A message has just been broken: coordinates of a convoy headed toward an ambush. The information is clear, but to act on it would reveal their secret. They sit in silence, staring at the numbers on the page. A colonel from the Admiralty stands nearby, expression unreadable. He explains it calmly. If we save them, the Germans will change their keys. We'll lose weeks, maybe months, thousands more after that. No one speaks. The operators look down at their hands, the same hands that hours ago fed the bomb its questions. Now they must decide who will die to keep others alive. A young woman named Elsie whispers, "They'll never know we could have warned them." No one answers. The colonel leaves. The machines resume. That night, the convoy vanishes. The next morning, a memo arrives with the words, "Do not discuss this matter further." The paper is filed away like all the others. Work continues. Part 3. The Letter Never Sent. In a small rented room near the railway, one of the cryptanalysts, Peter Shaw, keeps a drawer full of unsent letters. They begin with words like "Dearest Mother" and "My darling Anna," but they never get past the first page. He writes to explain, to confess, to make sense of what he does, but each sentence collapses under the weight of secrecy. He tries again. There's a sound that never leaves your ears, the click of meaning arriving too late. Then he stops, tears the page, and burns it in the small grate. Every evening he walks the same path back to the park. He sees the lights glowing in the huts, the silhouettes moving behind papered windows. To the outside world they are clerks, typists, office staff. No one knows they are writing the invisible history of the war. He wonders if he'll remember how to speak honestly when this is over, if truth, once coded, can ever be restored. Part 4. The Confession. In the canteen one night, after the tea has gone cold, two operators linger. The room smells of cigarettes and boiled cabbage. They speak in half whispers, careful, testing the edges of permission. One says, "I dream of ships, always ships. Sometimes they sink before I can read the message." The other nods. "I dream of the sound, that hum. Even when it stops, I hear it." They laugh quietly, but the laughter dies fast. Neither is sure whether what they're doing is saving or sacrificing. They're not even sure there's a difference anymore. Before leaving, one of them slides a note under the sugar tin, a single word written in pencil: "Forgive." Part 5. The Ghost in the Machine. Sometimes, when the hut is empty, someone leaves the bombs running overnight. Not for work, just for the sound. The rhythm of the wheels has become a kind of lullaby. It fills the silence that otherwise feels unbearable. A cleaner arriving before dawn once swears she hears voices under the mechanical whir. Not words, just the cadence of thought, the echo of all those who've listened too long. The machines have begun to mirror their masters, restless, relentless, haunted. The hum is no longer just electricity. Its memory. Part 6. A message they can't read. June 1944. The invasion of Normandy begins. In Hut 8, someone receives a coded message from the German High Command. They decrypt it in record time, deliver it up the chain, and go back to work. Hours later, a second message comes in, not military this time, but personal. It's from a German operator sending his last words to his wife before his station falls. The translation is short, heartbreakingly simple. "Tell our son I kept faith." The room falls silent. For a few moments, no one breathes. Then the supervisor clears his throat and says, "File it." The page slides into the cabinet. The drawer shuts with a sound like finality. That night, no one in the hut speaks. Part 7. The illusion of distance. To outsiders, Bletchley is a place apart from war, a sanctuary of intellect far from mud and blood. But those inside know better. They live with death at one remove, close enough to feel its heat, far enough never to see the faces. Some begin to dissociate, seeing the codes not as people but as puzzles. It's the only way to keep working. Others keep small rituals to stay human, a photo pinned to a typewriter, a prayer written on the back of a memo. One woman keeps a jar of lavender by her desk, the only scent not claimed by ink and sweat. She says it reminds her that something somewhere is still alive. But most stop talking about the war altogether. They talk about weather, about bicycles, about tea. Anything except the ghosts they've learned to translate. Part 8. The message in the fire. In late 1944, a fire breaks out in one of the storage huts. It's contained quickly, but not before a few coded papers are destroyed. Watching the flames, an officer mutters that perhaps it's better that way. Too many truths in one place can make a country sick. When the embers die, the smell lingers for days. Burnt paper, scorched secrets. The workers keep their distance, walking around the blackened patch of floor as if it's sacred ground. Someone jokes that the fire burned only lies, not truths. No one laughs. Part 9. The letter that arrives too late. Winter again. A notice appears on the bulletin board. Telegrams may be delayed due to weather conditions. For most, it's a minor inconvenience. For one woman in Hut 3, it's everything. Her fiancé serves in a naval convoy. When the news of his ship's sinking arrives, she's at her post, decoding enemy traffic that includes the coordinates of that very attack. She reads them without realizing what they mean. Only later does she connect the time, the place, the silence that followed. She continues working until her shift ends, then walks into the snow, stands by the frozen lake, and whispers his name once. Then she goes back inside. The machines are still turning. The war hasn't paused. No one ever mentions it. The next day she returns to her desk, hair damp from melting snow, expression unreadable. On her notepad she writes, "Meaning must wait." Part 10. The Weight of Silence. By early 1945, the corridors of Bletchley are full of ghosts, not supernatural, but psychological. People move through them like sleepwalkers. The sound of machines has become so constant that silence feels wrong, almost frightening. When the war ends, many will find it impossible to speak of what they did. They'll take their secrets to small cottages and quiet marriages, their minds still half-tuned to the hum of rotors and relays. Some will spend years flinching at the sound of a typewriter. Others will wake in the night, convinced they've missed a code that could have changed everything. Knowledge, once gained, never lets go. It becomes part of your breath, your heartbeat, your silence. Part 11. The Dawn After. The first morning after Germany surrenders, Bletchley Park is strangely still. The air smells of rain and dust. No messages, no deadlines, no secrecy. Only absence. People wander the grounds, unsure what to do with freedom. Some cry quietly. Some laugh in disbelief. Others just sit under the trees and stare at the empty sky. A few of them gather by the lake, skipping stones across the surface. Each ripple feels like the past fading into water. Someone says, "We won." Another answers, "Did we?" No one knows how to measure peace anymore. Part 12. The Quiet Reckoning. A week later, a memo circulates. Destroy all remaining code sheets. Dismantle machines. Maintain silence under the Official Secrets Act. The workers read it, sign their names, and return to their stations. They begin to dismantle the tools that define their lives, unscrewing panels, cutting wires, feeding years of history into fire. The bombs die one by one, their hum replaced by the crackle of burning paper. The smell of smoke drifts through the park, mixing with spring air. For some, it feels like purification. For others, like erasure. When the last machine stops, the silence is almost unbearable. It's the loudest sound they've ever heard. Part 13. The Final Entry. In a small notebook hidden beneath her mattress, one operator writes, "We built a weapon that no one will ever see. We spoke in silence. We carried truths too heavy to tell. The world will forget our names, but not our work. We broke a code, and it broke us back." She closes the notebook, wraps it in brown paper, and places it in a drawer. Years later, her grandchildren will find it and wonder what it means. They will think it's poetry. In a way, it is. Chapter 7. The Shadows Beyond Victory. Operation Ultra and the Hidden Legacy. Part 1. The Day the Machines Went Quiet. The war ends without ceremony here. One morning the rotors are turning, lights blinking, papers flowing through hands. By evening, the switches are flipped, the fans stop, and the air stills. You stand in the machine room as the last bomb winds down. Its final clicks fade like a heartbeat finding rest. The silence that replaces it feels alive, enormous. No bells, no flags, no crowds. Just the sound of boots on linoleum, chairs being pushed back, the low murmur of disbelief. A technician wipes her hands on a rag and whispers, "That's it." Someone answers, "That's it." Outside, the countryside smells of wet earth and blooming fields, the first spring in years that isn't shadowed by fear. But inside the park, the air smells of metal and memory. Victory feels less like triumph and more like a deep exhale that no one dares release. Part 2. The Bonfires of Knowledge. Within days, new orders arrive. Top secret. Destroy all materials related to Enigma and Ultra. The workers gather in the courtyards, each carrying what they built their lives around. Code sheets, wiring diagrams, intercepted messages. They stack them in barrels and feed them to flame. The fire burns blue and gold, hot enough to twist metal. Paper curls like dry leaves, words dissolving into sparks. The air smells of ink and smoke and finality. They stand watching in silence. No speeches, no photographs. Just the knowledge that the greatest intelligence achievement in history must leave no trace. One woman drops her notebook in last. It flares briefly, then turns to ash. For the first time in years, her hands are empty. You can hear the crackle of the pages collapsing, the sigh of rotors melting, the whisper of history erasing itself. And yet, the fire doesn't feel like loss. It feels like protection, as if the truth is too powerful to survive peace intact. Part 3. Ultra. The Secret Victory. For 30 years, the name Ultra will not be spoken. Even those who lived it speak around it. The work, the office, the thing we did. It becomes a shared ghost, an invisible badge carried by people who can never show it. The British government seals the files in vaults marked to be opened at a later date. That date keeps moving further away. The silence becomes policy, the secrecy institutional. Within those sealed boxes lie not only blueprints and intercepts, but something far more fragile, the proof that intelligence, not firepower, shortened the war, that minds, not armies, turned the tide. When Churchill's post-war memoirs are published, he writes only a single oblique sentence. It was thanks to the secret sources of the highest importance that we were often well informed of the enemy's intentions. He never names Bletchley. He never names Ultra. Even gratitude is encrypted. Part 4. The Ghost Profession. The codebreakers return to ordinary lives. They work as teachers, librarians, engineers, housewives, postmen. No one around them suspects the scale of what they've done. At dinner parties, when conversation turns to the war, they smile politely and say they did clerical work in the countryside. No one asks more. No one would believe it anyway. Some never truly return. They live half in memory, half in the invisible networks they helped design. 4 years after, when they hear static on the radio, they still listen for patterns. The habit never fades. They see the rise of new machines, smaller, faster, stranger, and recognize the echo. They never say it aloud, but each transistor, each flicker of binary feels familiar. Their secret has evolved without them. They built the skeleton of the information age, and then were told to forget it ever existed. Part 5. The Silence of Alan Turing. Alan Turing returns to a quieter war, one fought not with codes, but with prejudice. His brilliance remains, but his world has no place for it now. He works on new designs, dreams of universal machines, of intelligence without limits. He runs by the river each morning, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Sometimes he stops mid-stride, lost in equations only he can see. He imagines a future where machines will converse, create, perhaps even care. But the country he saved turns against him. His difference becomes his crime. They take from him what they cannot understand: freedom, dignity, trust. He faces it with quiet grace, but something inside him dims. The same mind that broke the unbreakable cannot survive the cruelty of conformity. One summer morning in 1954, they find him gone. On the table beside his bed lies an apple, bitten once. Some say it was poisoned, others say it was symbolic, a quiet rebellion, a final act of logic. The newspapers barely mention his name. The machines he inspired keep humming. History moves on, leaving him behind. But somewhere in the circuitry of every computer, in every coded language that followed, his pattern remains, patient, exact, humane. Part 6. The New Silence. Decades pass. The world becomes noisier. Radios, televisions, satellites. Information flows faster than thought. But beneath the noise lies the same foundation of secrecy that Bletchley built. The Cold War inherits Ultra's bones. Britain's GCHQ, America's NSA, both born from the mansion's ashes. Encryption becomes empire, data the new territory. What began as defense turns into surveillance. You can trace the lineage, from the click of Enigma's rotors, to the pulse of fiber-optic cables under the sea. The hum never stopped. It just changed frequency. Somewhere, in a room much like Hut 8, someone still listens, still watches, still believes that knowledge must be hidden to keep the world safe. And maybe they're right. Or maybe the lesson was never learned, that the pursuit of understanding always carries a shadow, the temptation to keep too much for ourselves. Part 7. The Return of Light. When the secret finally breaks, it happens quietly. The year is 1974. A journalist uncovers fragments. A retired officer confirms a rumor, and the first book about Bletchley Park appears. The world is astonished. People who once passed unnoticed on buses and in shops are suddenly hailed as heroes. Old women in cardigans, men with quiet voices, their memories opening like drawers long sealed. Yet for many, the revelation brings no relief, only confusion. The story belongs more to others now, to historians and headlines. Their own experiences feel smaller, paler, as if exposure has bleached them. Still, something tender blooms in that moment. Recognition, gratitude, and a faint sense that justice, however late, can still arrive. Part 8. The Hidden Legacy. You walk through the empty rooms of Bletchley as they are turned into a museum. Dust lies thick on the floors. Sunlight catches the air like gold thread. The machines are gone, but their ghosts linger. The smell of oil, the faint vibration in the walls. Plaques will be mounted, tours arranged, voices recorded. Visitors will stand where the operators once sat and marvel at the idea that thought itself once changed the world. But the real legacy isn't in the displays. It's in everything that came after. The computers, the satellites, the algorithms, the endless appetite for information. All of it born here, in a place that pretended to be invisible. You can almost hear the hum again, not from the past, but from the present, from every device that listens and calculates, each one an echo of that first attempt to make logic human. Part 9. The File That Remained. Years later, archivists discover a single folder that survived the fires. Inside, faded memos, fragments of equations, a photograph of a young woman at a typewriter. No name written. On the back, in faint pencil, a single line. We never worked for glory. We worked for understanding. They place it under glass. Visitors pass by, reading the words without knowing the faces. But you do. You've seen them, in the flicker of lamplight, in the rain-soaked bicycles, in the quiet rooms where thought became salvation. And as you stand before that glass, you realize, this was never a story about war. It was a story about what the human mind can bear, and what it must sometimes forget. Chapter 8. Echoes in the Wires. The Birth of the Digital Age. Part 1. After the Static. The war ends, but the sound does not. You hear it in the walls, in the faint hiss of every radio, in the soft tick of power grids waking at dawn. The world is learning to hum again. You're standing in a laboratory lit by cold fluorescence. It smells of dust, hot metal, and possibility. The chalkboards are covered in equations, circles, lines, strange hieroglyphs of thought. Where once men broke codes, Now they try to build minds. The silence of Bletchley has evolved into a new kind of noise, the whisper of invention. Wires sprawl across tables like veins. Vacuum tubes glow with a dim, reddish pulse. Somewhere, a fan begins to turn, and with that simple motion, the future starts. Part 2. The Children of Logic. They call them computers. Not machines, not yet, but people. Rows of women in cardigans and spectacles, seated before adding machines and paper ledgers. They calculate trajectories, statistics, the movement of economies. The war may be over, but precision is still a form of survival. Soon, though, the word computer changes its meaning. Metal replaces muscle. Circuits replace patience. The machine begins to take over the arithmetic of existence. In Cambridge, Manchester, and Princeton, the veterans of code-breaking reassemble under new names and new purposes. They talk not of Enigma now, but of memory, of processing, of intelligence divorced from exhaustion. They see a path ahead, lit faintly by the glow of vacuum tubes, a path that leads beyond war, beyond language, beyond the limits of flesh. Somewhere between fear and fascination, humanity begins to teach its reflection how to think. Part 3. The First Sparks. In a basement in Manchester, 1948, a new kind of hum fills the air. The Manchester baby, the first stored program computer, flickers to life. Its screen glows with phosphor light, showing patterns no one yet understands. The engineers cheer quietly, like men at a birth who don't yet realize what they've brought into the world. The machine has just performed its first calculation. It has remembered something. It's small, imperfect, but alive in its own way. A heartbeat in circuits, a thought in numbers. Someone jokes that it sounds like a radio tuned between stations. Another replies, "That's the sound of the future thinking." They are right, though they can't yet know how right. From these fragile beginnings, the world will build empires made entirely of code. Part 4. The Mind of Turing. Alan Turing, still haunted by secrecy and loss, writes from his small office in Manchester. The window sticks. The paint is flaking. Outside, the city hums. Trams, factories, electricity. Inside, he dreams of something no one else can yet see. He calls it the automatic computing engine. To most, it's just another project proposal. To him, it's the beginning of a philosophy, a world where thought can exist without body. He writes, "It is possible to conceive a machine that will carry out any operation which could be done by a human computer. The line is modest, but within it hides the birth of artificial intelligence, the echo of Enigma transformed into imagination." He sketches circuits that mimic reasoning, algorithms that simulate memory. His colleagues smile politely, not realizing they are watching the dawn of something vast. He believes that machines will one day learn, not because they are clever, but because they are patient, because they can repeat the same act of thought until the universe reveals its pattern. Outside, rain taps the window like Morse code. Inside, the man who once taught logic to save lives now teaches it to dream. Part 5. The Ghost of Colossus. At Dollis Hill, the engineers who built the wartime Colossus machine work quietly under new titles. Their wartime creation, the first electronic computer, has been dismantled, its plans burned, its existence denied. But the knowledge remains in their hands, in their fingertips. One of them, Tommy Flowers, walks through the remains of the old laboratory. He can still hear the machine in memory, the warm crackle of tubes, the clicking of relays, the pulse of progress. He builds new machines now for civilian use, but each one feels like a descendant of that hidden ancestor. He knows that if Colossus had been allowed to survive, the world would have entered the computer age a decade sooner. But perhaps it wasn't time yet. Perhaps humanity needed to forget before it could learn again. He touches the edge of a broken relay, whispers, "You did well," and leaves. The hum lingers behind him, softer than memory. Part 6. The Birth of a New Language. In the early 1950s, something begins to shift. Mathematics turns into syntax. Instructions become language. The first computer programs are written, strings of numbers giving rise to motion, to response, to imitation. To write code is to command silence to speak. Every line becomes a prayer to logic. Every mistake, a small explosion of chaos. The programmers discover that the hardest part of creation is not machinery, but humility, the awareness that they are teaching something that might one day teach them back. They speak of loops, of memory, of decisions. They don't yet realize they are writing philosophy in binary. The room hums. The lights blink. And from the static, a new voice begins to rise. The first whisper of artificial thought. Part 7. The Age of Signals. By the 1960s, the world has woven itself in copper and light. Telephone wires stretch like vines across continents. Satellites orbit overhead, carrying invisible messages through airless night. The planet hums with communication, a single nervous system connecting billions. Governments call it progress. Poets call it noise. But beneath both lies something older, the same impulse that built Enigma, that drove Turing's equations, that sent signals across the Atlantic during war. The need to be heard, to be understood. You can stand anywhere now, in a city, a forest, a quiet room, and feel it in your bones. The faint vibration of connection, the invisible pulse of meaning traveling faster than thought. The code that once divided the world has become the code that binds it. Part 8. The Machine That Dreams. A computer in a research lab hums softly through the night. No one is watching. Its screens glow faintly, running endless calculations. In those numbers, it begins to simulate something astonishing, learning, not understanding in the human sense, but pattern, repetition, prediction. It finds rhythm in randomness, sense in noise. It is the direct descendant of the bomb, the child of logic, the echo of every mind that once stared into chaos and refused to look away. The scientists call it progress. But if you listen closely, the hum hasn't changed. It's the same note that filled the huts of Bletchley, the same rhythm that turned despair into comprehension. Only now, it belongs to machines that never sleep. Part 9. The Legacy of the Invisible. At Bletchley Park, decades later, the rooms are quiet again. The air smells of old wood and history. Tourists move slowly through the exhibits, whispering as if afraid to disturb the ghosts. In one display case sits a small brass rotor, blackened with age. Its letters are faded, but you can still read them if you lean close. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Next to it, a modern smartphone vibrates in someone's pocket. Different form. Same principle. Encryption, connection, communication. The eternal dance of secrecy and understanding. The world has changed its machines, but not its nature. We still build logic to contain our chaos. We still speak in codes to feel less alone. Part 10. The Hum Beneath the World. You close your eyes. The decades dissolve. Enigma, Colossus, transistor, mainframe, microchip, all become one long breath. The hum is everywhere now, in the cables under the sea, in the satellites above, in the silent signals between devices. It's the sound of everything speaking at once. And yet, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the older rhythm underneath, the whisper of human patience, the pulse of intelligence born in fear but carried forward in hope. The war never truly ended. It only changed languages. From ciphers to circuits, from codebooks to codebases, the struggle remains the same, to find meaning before the noise swallows it. And as the hum deepens, spreading through every wire and wave, you realize you've been listening to the same story all along, the story of how thought learned to travel. Chapter 9. The Last Transmission. Remembering the Invisible War. Part 1. The Frequency That Never Sleeps. The airwaves are never truly empty. Even in silence, something moves, a vibration too faint for ears, a pulse of energy that refuses to die. You stand on a field that was once alive with cables and huts, now only grass and wind. This was Bletchley Park, though the name means little to those passing by. To them, it's a museum. To you, it's a heartbeat buried in the soil. If you listen closely, the earth still hums. Maybe it's the power lines beyond the trees. Maybe it's the echo of machines that once spun here without rest. Or maybe it's memory itself, remembering the shape of what it once carried. The world has changed its rhythm, but not its message. Every satellite, every server, every algorithm owes its lineage to this quiet place. The code continues, unbroken, disguised as progress. Part 2. The Operator's Return. Decades later, they come back, those who still can, elderly now, walking with canes, their hands trembling not from fear but from recognition. They stand before the huts like people visiting an old friend's grave. The paint is peeling, the windows dusty, but the smell of damp paper and oil lingers, unchanged. One woman touches the door frame and whispers, "I can still hear it." Her granddaughter, holding her arm, smiles, not understanding. Inside, they find their past reconstructed. Typewriters behind glass, uniforms folded neatly, an Enigma machine waiting patiently on a table. They stare at it like a mirror that no longer reflects. A curator explains how it worked. They nod politely. They know already. They know what it felt like to hold the weight of a message whose meaning could end thousands of lives. Before leaving, one of them leans close to the machine and presses a key. A light flickers briefly. She exhales, almost a sigh. The sound it makes is the same as always, a single letter glowing in the dark. Part 3. The Unsent Message. In an archive, a historian finds a sealed envelope labeled Ultra, confidential. Inside, a transmission never sent, dated April 1945. Its content is simple, almost childlike. To whoever finds this, remember that the machine is not what matters. What matters is that we listened. The handwriting is careful, the ink faded to brown. No signature, no origin. The message is preserved, digitized, uploaded, its journey finally complete, traveling through fiber optic veins across oceans, continents, time zones. It becomes data, then memory, then meaning again. You wonder if the sender ever imagined their words would live this long, that a message meant for no one would become a testament for everyone. Part 4. The Other Side of Silence. Across the sea, In a forgotten German bunker, restoration workers uncover another Enigma machine. The metal is rusted, the wood swollen with age, but the letters are still legible. When they power it on for the first time, a faint click echoes through the chamber. Mechanical, human, eternal. It doesn't matter that it no longer encodes anything. The gesture itself feels sacred, the completion of a circuit between enemies who never met, each believing they fought for truth, each leaving behind only the same fragile relics. Metal, paper, silence. One of the workers says softly, "They were all just trying to be heard." The others nod. The machine hums once more. Part 5. The Code in the Blood. Generations later, people type on glowing keyboards, send encrypted messages, unlock devices with fingerprints. They never think of Bletchley, or Enigma, or the women and men who gave logic its voice. But every keystroke, every password, every byte of information carries their fingerprint. The code has entered the bloodstream of the world. It lives in every search engine, every GPS, every whisper that crosses a digital sky. The war that began in silence now fills every waking second with noise. And yet, underneath the algorithms and notifications, the same question lingers. Can knowledge ever exist without conscience? The machines inherited our logic, but not our empathy. Perhaps that was the last code we never cracked. Part 6. The Woman by the Sea. Somewhere on the English coast, an elderly woman sits by the shore at dusk. The wind smells of salt and kelp. Gulls cry overhead. She brings a small radio with her, an old one, scratched, humming faintly even when turned off. She doesn't listen to stations anymore. She tunes to the static, the in-between. She says it's where the past still lives. When the hum deepens, she closes her eyes. She imagines the messages she once transcribed, coordinates, weather reports, fragments of lives, and wonders if they're still out there, still bouncing between the stars, still waiting to be heard. She smiles faintly, whispering, "It's all still talking, isn't it?" The sea doesn't answer. It never has to. Part 7. The Museum of Sound. At Bletchley, a new exhibit opens, not of objects, but of recordings. Hidden microphones capture the sounds of reconstructed bombs turning. Visitors wear headphones and close their eyes. The noise fills their heads, rhythmic, insistent, endless. For a moment, they understand. This was what victory sounded like. Not drums or cheers, but persistence. Not triumph, but endurance. Children remove their headphones wide-eyed, saying it felt like standing inside a heartbeat. They aren't wrong. It's the pulse of logic, the same one that still runs through every device they hold. The hum continues long after they leave. It always does. Part 8. The Last Code. In 2013, a letter once written by Alan Turing is auctioned to a private collector. It contains a single equation and one line in his handwriting. The question is not whether machines can think, but whether we can still feel in their presence. It's unclear whether he meant it as philosophy, warning, or confession. Perhaps all three. You imagine him writing it, alone, half-tired, half-luminous, the same mind that once decoded destruction now pondering creation. You imagine him pausing, hearing the faint hum of a radio, smiling to himself, then folding the page, sealing it, and sending it into the world like a message in a bottle. It never reached its destination. But maybe it was never meant to. Maybe it was addressed to us. Part 9. The Last Transmission. There's a room deep beneath the museum, closed to the public. Inside it, one of the surviving bombs has been restored to working order. Every year, on the anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, a technician switches it on for 1 hour. It spins slowly, its lights blinking, its rhythm steady and ancient. The room fills with that familiar sound, not the roar of war, but the murmur of persistence, of understanding, of faith in thought. Then, at exactly 11 o'clock, the technician types one sentence into the console. "We remember you." The machine answers as it always did, with light, with noise, with meaning hidden in motion. But for a heartbeat, the hum feels different, almost human, almost aware. Then the power cuts. Silence returns. But even after the lights fade, something remains. A resonance in the air. A tone too low to hear but too deep to forget. The final transmission has already been sent. It's not in Morse, or binary, or code. It's in us. Part 10. The Sound of Forever. You walk outside into night. The air is cold, the sky heavy with stars. Somewhere in the dark, radio waves drift endlessly. Fragments of speech, bursts of static, the faint hum of a machine built 80 years ago. They travel outward at the speed of light, past the moon, past the planets, carrying our first great secret into the quiet. Maybe one day, something will hear it. Maybe they'll decode it. Maybe they'll understand that this is what we were. Creatures who turned silence into music, who turned fear into logic, who built meaning out of chaos. The hum continues, low, eternal, benevolent. It sounds like wind, like memory, like forgiveness. And if you listen long enough, you realize it's the same hum that's been there since the beginning. The one that started in a rain-soaked workshop in Berlin, moved through the hearts of mathematicians, crossed the ocean in invisible signals, and now lives quietly inside every machine that waits for you to speak. You breathe. You listen. You remember. The transmission never ended. It just found a new frequency. Epilogue. The Sea of Signals. Part 1. The Return to Silence. The wind is softer now. The war, the machines, the noise, all of it has dissolved into the air. You're standing once more before the horizon, where the sky and sea meet in the language of calm. The world hums, but quietly. Electricity moves beneath your feet, through cables that cross oceans like veins of light. Every pulse of energy is a message, every flicker a memory. Somewhere out there, the remnants of those first transmissions still travel. Waves of code drifting endlessly through the void, carrying fragments of love, orders, fear, hope. No one can call them back. No one would want to. They belong to eternity now. Part 2. The Beach of Wires. The shore is scattered with relics, bits of copper, glass, and corroded steel. You pick one up, a piece of wire, thin and twisted, the ghost of a signal that once changed the world. You imagine the voices it carried, the click of Enigma keys, the laughter of exhausted operators, the whispered prayers of those who never knew their messages were being read. The sea has softened it, made it harmless again. Salt has erased its sharpness. The waves have rounded its edges. Even the artifacts of war are forgiven, in time. You toss the wire back into the tide. It sinks quietly, vanishing without ripple. Part 3. The Language Beneath Waves. The sea has always spoken in code. Its currents shift in patterns too vast for human eyes to see. Its tides are the original encryption, rhythm without explanation, meaning without translation. The mathematicians once tried to describe it. They mapped its motion, measured its depth, charted its temperature. But no one has ever truly broken it. The sea keeps its secrets better than any machine. Perhaps that's why so many stories end here. Because beneath the noise and invention, beneath all our equations and devices, there is this: water and silence, infinite, untranslatable. The machines tried to mimic this, to understand pattern as creation, to make thought flow like tide. But even they, for all their logic, could only come close. Part 4. The Memory of the Machine. You can still feel the hum sometimes, in the static between radio stations, in the electricity before a storm, in the quiet rhythm of your own pulse. It's the sound of everything we've learned trying to remember where it came from. The first spark, the first calculation, the first letter that glowed on a board in a dark room, telling no one and everyone at once that meaning had survived. You think of them all now. The Polish cryptographers in the forest, the women at the Balms, the German operators tapping their final words, the man who imagined machines that could love logic. All of them gone, yet all still here, folded into every circuit, every waveform, every quiet moment of connection that passes invisibly between strangers. This is how memory endures, not in names, but in rhythm. Part 5. The Listener. You close your eyes. The air tastes of rain again, just like at the beginning. You hear the soft patter on the water, the same tempo as the rotors once turning, the same cadence as a message decoded in the dark. Somewhere, far away, another listener hears the same sound. On a ship, in a satellite, in a city still awake at midnight. They don't know you, but they're listening too. Across time, across distance, the signal finds its way. It always has. You breathe, and the breath becomes part of it. The endless network of sound, silence, and understanding. For a moment, you can almost hear them all. The operators, the engineers, the dreamers, the dead. They speak without words. Their message as simple as it ever was. We were here. We tried to understand. Part 6. The Ocean of Memory. The sun breaks through the clouds. The light ripples across the surface of the water like static made holy. Every glimmer feels like a signal, the sea reflecting back the thoughts of those who once listened beneath its waves. Convoys that never returned. Submarines that disappeared. Messages that never reached their destination. The ocean keeps them all. It remembers in rhythm, not in language. It speaks in the language of repetition, the way waves repeat themselves not because they forget, but because they forgive. You realize that perhaps everything we ever invented, the codes, the circuits, the logic, was an attempt to imitate that forgiveness, to make memory bearable, to make meaning eternal. Part 7. The Light That Remains. Night returns slowly. The last light fades across the horizon like a photograph developing in reverse. The air is still, the water calm. You feel the weight of silence again, not absence, but completion. Somewhere far beneath you, the cables still hum. Billions of messages cross the seabed, carrying everything we are. Love letters, arguments, news, noise. and through all of it runs a single invisible thread. The one that began with a wooden machine and a handful of people who refused to stop thinking. Their story was never about war. It was about the persistence of mind. About what happens when human beings decide that truth, even hidden, is worth seeking. That hum will never end. Not while there are signals to send. Not while there are ears to listen. Part 8. The Return. Rain begins again. Soft, familiar, unhurried. You stand still and let it fall. The sound on your coat, on the sea, on the earth. It's the same pattern that began everything. The first rhythm. The first message. You exhale, and the breath joins the wind. It travels across the fields, across the old mansion, across the world that grew from its silence. In that moment, you understand. The code was never just about secrecy. It was about connection. The fragile thread between thought and meaning, between noise and understanding, between one heartbeat and another. Part 9. The Last Line. The waves rise and fall, writing and erasing the same story again and again. The hum softens, the rain slows, and the air becomes still. Somewhere far beyond hearing, the last signal fades, not as an ending, but as an echo returning home. The wind carries it out over the water, where it dissolves into distance, becoming part of the sea of signals that never stop moving. And as you stand there, alone but not lonely, you understand what they all understood in their own way. Every message, every code, every act of translation was simply another way of saying, "We were here." The hum lingers. The sea breathes. The past listens. You take one last breath and let it drift away. Aftermath. The long silence. The war ends differently for everyone. For some, it ends in a field where the guns finally go quiet, and the air feels too large, too empty. For others, it ends years later, in a dream they can't quite wake from, or in the stillness of a photograph that never learned how to fade. You stand among the ruins of what was once noise. Streets where no one hurries anymore. Homes rebuilt over ashes that still remember their names. Somewhere, a child picks a wildflower from the crack of a fallen wall. The world begins again, unsure of how. The silence that follows war is not peace. Not yet. It's something fragile, trembling, still learning to breathe. Nations count their losses in numbers, but grief does not care for arithmetic. It lingers in the air, in the eyes of those who survived, in the letters never sent. It hides in kitchens, in the pauses of family dinners, in the faces of strangers who all seem older than they should be. You walk through that silence, careful not to disturb it. The ground beneath your feet hums with the faint heartbeat of memory. Every stone, every tree, every stretch of road holds an echo of someone who once passed this way. A soldier, a nurse, a farmer, a friend. They are gone, yet they remain, folded into the landscape like seeds waiting for spring. Time, too, becomes gentle here. It does not march. It drifts, like dust in a slant of morning light. And within that light, history softens, no longer a list of victories and defeats, but a whisper of human things. Courage, fear, love, loss. Each one ordinary, each one extraordinary. You realize that the war is not entirely behind you. It lives on in language, in lullabies, in the quiet way people look at the sky before it rains. It's in the inventions born from desperation, the art made from ruins, the peace treaties signed with shaking hands. It's in the memory of those who dared to hope when hope itself seemed like treason. The survivors build. They plant gardens in the shadows of craters. They hang curtains in window frames that once watched over fire. They speak softly, because loudness reminds them of something they'd rather forget. And yet, somehow, life returns. Children are born who will never know the sound of sirens, and that is how healing begins. You keep walking. The road turns toward the present, and the air feels different now, warmer, more forgiving. In the distance, a bell tolls. Not for mourning this time, but for remembrance. It rings for all who stood where you now stand. For those who fought, those who fled, those who stayed, and those who never had the chance to choose. History does not end in triumph or tragedy. It ends, always, in the quiet, in the space where stories are told and retold until they become lessons instead of warnings. And that is where you find yourself, not at the end of a war, but at the beginning of understanding. You pause, listening to the world as it exhales. Somewhere, the sea murmurs against the shore. A train moves through the night, carrying people home. A page turns. A life continues. And in that gentle rhythm, you feel something like grace. By remembering the past, we keep the souls of those who lived it alive. Every name spoken, every story retold, every image held a little longer in the mind, these are small acts of resurrection. The world asks only this, to not forget, to carry the memory forward, not as a burden, but as a light. So as you leave this story, take a moment. Let the silence settle. Let the faces you've met along this journey rest somewhere in the back of your thoughts. And when you see the world tomorrow, in the laughter of your children, the stillness of dawn, or the kindness of a stranger, remember that peace is built from these very moments. Thank you for walking this path. Thank you for listening. You've been part of Echoes of War, where the past is not gone, only waiting to be heard.